Thank you, guys. Speaking of fiance, I'm going to steal her water. I know I'm going to end up needing it. Thank you. Well, my name is Matt, and I am an alcoholic. My sobriety date is October 9th of 2017. I have a home group. We meet in Cary off of Jones Franklin Road, Tuesdays and Thursdays at 7 o'clock. If you're ever in the area, swing on by, or if you just want to drive an hour and a half to come to our home group, you can do that too. It's up to you. I have a sponsor. He knows he's my sponsor, and I know he's mine because there's this thing, and I don't know if it's a North Carolina tradition. You'll hear a little bit about it, but I meet him at 6:30 in the morning every Thursday, and it tends to be what people do in the state is they meet their sponsor at the earliest possible hour, because that is when you are the most spiritually open and ready, apparently. At least that's what I'm gathering. Thank you guys for asking me to speak tonight. In early sobriety, I definitely remembered learning to take the message out of anything that I heard, regardless how much I related to the individual that was telling the story. Every part of the story I could relate to in one way or another. So, message, can't guarantee it unless you're looking for it. So, I challenge you. Experience, strength, and hope. So, I grew up in California, in the Bay Area, which is not Southern California. I did not grow up on the beach wearing flip-flops every day and surfing to school. So I was in the northern part of California. But I was born and raised there. I grew up in a middle-class family, and for all appearance sake, it was just that cookie cutter, right? It was stay-at-home mom. Dad was construction. He would get off early enough to coach me in any sport that I was doing, and mom would sign up to be the PTA leader or the class mom for any activity, right? And so from the outside looking in, very much would never imagine that both myself and my brother would, turn out the way we did in our early 20s, but we'll focus on me. So I was very much the overachiever in everything that I did at a young age, right? I had to go all in everything that I did, right? I'd get, the straight A's. I was the kid who would get the stickers for always turning in every assignment and not missing class or being tardy. All of the sports I did, I would go 100% into those as well. I would usually excel at those things. What I learned coming out of elementary school and going into junior high is that people don't tend to like when you are outshining them, we could say, or that you are what the kids would call nowadays a try-hard, right? So trying is just not the way to make friends. And so I grew up with two older cousins and my older brother. They're the guys, the men in my life, I guess boys at the time, that I looked to for guidance and that I looked to really compare, right? They were all the popular ones. They had the girlfriends and all the friends, and they did the things, and they got invited to parties. And I learned that the thing that they all had that I didn't have was this very fun word called apathy. And so they just didn't care, and all of a sudden everyone cared about them, which made no sense to me because I cared so deeply for everything that I did and for everyone around me, and yet I never felt accepted. So out of absolute fear of not being accepted, I adopted an attitude of apathy. Because the less I care about anything, the more attention I'm going to get and the more accepted I'm going to feel. So I ran with it. And so junior high, the less I cared about school, the less I cared about sports and doing things, the more, we'll call them friends, I started to amass, and the more popularity I started to gain, which for me was that underlying acceptance that I needed. I needed to feel a part of, and I needed to feel accepted. I also learned in junior high that it really doesn't hurt if you're the kid that can supply the alcohol and the other forms of substance at the junior high parties. And so I started doing those things. I was the young kid in 8th grade who could get you those things that you might be needing, and I could get the alcohol and all of those, and all of a sudden I was washed with new friends and new acceptance because everyone wanted me around, and that made me feel like I was there. Made me feel accepted, and I didn't have to feel that fear. I can't really, I hear a lot of people's stories about like that first drink, and what that first time made them feel like. And I can't really pinpoint an exact first time, but I can pinpoint a roundabout age when I started drinking and I started to recognize that I felt a part of when I was drinking. More or less, it was probably that I was just going further into that apathy and just not caring anymore than it was anything about people accepting me more or me being more prepared socially. It's just the alcohol helped mask that perception I had that I didn't fit in and that people didn't want me around and that I couldn't be me, right? And so, I didn't have to fake the apathy anymore because now that I was drinking and I was on the roll with that, I really just didn't care about anything anymore. That rolled into high school, and I continued doing that, right? I was that kid. I remember one of my friends grabbing my water bottle, one of those Crystal Geyser water bottles, and like taking a swig and then spitting it out and like, that's vodka! And I'm like, dude, shut up, what are you doing, right? Like, that was me in high school. I was that kid. Because what I also learned in high school is that you don't need to ask anyone to buy you alcohol. You can easily walk right into a store, grab a bottle, put it into your pants, and walk right on out. If they see you, then you just run. That worked too. So I learned how to do that. That also helped me feel accepted. Because I, again, was supplying the things to the people around me that they wanted. Right? They didn't want me. They wanted the things that I was supplying to them. But that was enough acceptance. That was all I needed. I didn't need you to like me. I just needed you to at least make me feel like you did. So I continued that. I actually heard someone share not too long ago, and she was like, I got a DUI in high school, and I always ask how many people got a DUI in high school, and not many people have, and I really felt like I should raise my hand at that point, but I didn't. But yeah, so I did that, right? Because not only was I the guy supplying the alcohol, but I was also the one who thought I could be a hero, right? And so, no, you don't drive. You've been drinking when we've been drinking the same amount. So I did that in high school. So I continued that path of running away from the people who truly care about me and running to the people that don't care about me but care about what I can bring to the table for them, right? All out of this fear of not being accepted. It's very much that cliche, alone in a room full of people, right? And that's what I was. At any given time, I was in a group of people who could care less what would happen to me. Right, that at any second could drop me for the next best thing, or if I wasn't giving them what they needed, they would be gone. But that was okay, as long as I was a part of, and I could stand in the circle, and I could feel like I'm accepted. That's okay for me. So I continued down that road. I went to a junior college. Mainly because I no longer had the grades to go to the universities and to the state colleges like a lot of my peers were doing. But I told myself it's the economical choice, and I'm going to go to junior college because it's going to be cheaper for my parents, and I'll do that, and then I'll transfer because future me is always going to solve all the problems that current me has. So throughout my, I'll do the quotations again, college career, I would sign up for a class. I would go for a couple of weeks, and then I would just stop going to class, but it didn't mean I wasn't still going to campus, because I needed to make everyone around me believe that I was a student and that I had my life together, because now acceptance was less about showing up to the parties with the alcohol, and it was more about going to school, getting the job. Right now, that's how I think I can be accepted. And so I started faking that too. And so I would tell people I was a college student to kind of get them off my back because I wasn't doing anything really in my life. But I would get to the campus and I would bring a bottle with me and I would find the deepest, darkest corner of the campus where I could get some Wi-Fi and black out. Come to and look at that, class is over, and head home, right? So I did that for a few years. My parents caught on to that. And they said, like, hey, listen, like, that's fine, you can keep taking classes, but you got to get a job, right? Because I'm not actually a student. So I did, and I went and really just would get any job that I could get. The problem is I have an uncanny ability to self-destruct in the face of success. So what I mean by that is I would get a job, work for about 6 months, and as soon as a supervisor or a superior would say, hey, listen, like, we're seeing a lot of potential, you're doing some good things, I would freak out and I would just self-destruct. I would ruin everything around me because, God forbid, I succeed, right? I've never been fired from a job. I need to put that out there, right? The correct term for what I did was voluntary termination. I would essentially just stop showing up and stop answering my phone, right? Continued doing that for a few years, right? And started faking the fact that I had a job to people around me, right? So again, appearance sake, I want you to think I have a job, so I'm going to tell you I'm heading out to work, when in reality, I'm going to go find somewhere I can grab that bottle and I can black out, because gone are the days now of drinking socially. Gone are the days to drink to be accepted. And I have brought myself to a point where I now am drinking to oblivion, because I no longer am willing to face the idea that I have taken my life and all of this potential that I've been told that I had and just absolutely squandered it, right? For a lot of years of my life, I lived in this nice, comfortable little zone of potential, right? Where people around me would always tell me I had so much potential. And if I never actually tried and failed at anything, I could live within this nice little zone of potential. And so I could feel that acceptance from people because I just really wasn't trying hard enough, but only if I did, I could just do so many great things. And so I lived in that zone, right? Because I don't want to step out of that zone. That's uncomfortable. I can live right here, happy. I can drink. I can use the way I want to in this little nice little world of potential. And again, I feel like there's not a lot of things I failed because there's just not a lot of things I tried. Right? I never put myself out there and had the courage to say, hey, I'm going to try something. I might fail, but I'm going to try it. No. I was like, oh, there's a chance I could fail. I'm just not going to do that. I'll go grab a bottle and black out. That sounds like a better idea to me. So I continued doing that for a long time. I just kept putting on this air of things are okay. My life is put together. I would do everything I could to make people around me believe that I was not as far gone as I was. I got caught up in some unsavory activities to the point that I had a couple, what I thought at the time, homeless guys come to my door, and they asked me, "Are you Matt Snyder?" I said, "No." They said, "Are you sure you're not Matthew Snyder?" I said, "No." And then they opened this manila folder. It's a big 8.5 by 11 of my driver's license. And I said, "That's not you?" I said, "Oh yeah, no, that's me. Yeah, that's me, right?" And then they proceeded to show me a bunch of surveillance photos of the things that I had been doing, and I felt like I was in like one of those crime TV shows where somebody had been parked out in a van somewhere with one of those high zoom telescope lenses and taking pictures of me. And they were telling me that due to the activities that I was participating in, I was looking at a maximum minimum in California of about 15 years in prison. And I freaked out. So I, They said, okay, well, you can come talk to us when you're ready to. I did the whole lawyer thing. But really what I did is I hopped on Google and I looked up what does a judge like to see when you're looking at criminal charges. And so, the first thing is, being an active member of your community, giving back to the community service. And so, of course, I'm like, well, what's number 2? And so number 2 was go to rehab. So I was like, all right, that one I'm down, right? I had seen movies, right? It looks like it's not so bad. Rehab, I can get on board with that, right? Like I'll get in, I'll get out, right? I'll have something to say. And in that rehab, I met some amazing people. We were very much about the cognitive behavioral therapy, right? And so I learned about maximizing and minimizing and all of these different great terms. But not once did I hear about the 12 steps or AA as a whole, right? I mean, I knew what the program was, but out of that rehab, that knowledge was not gained. So I got out of that rehab and I was fully aware of how I felt and what my feelings were doing and how the people around me were affecting my feelings. And so, my feelings were hurt and I'm going to feel my feelings, right? I cried a lot during that first rehab and during all of that because there were so many feelings. And that lasted about 9 months. I never admitted to anyone around me that I had a problem with alcohol. I never admitted to anyone around me that anything was wrong. I just had the feelings, felt the feelings, and kept going. That didn't last. It did not last. I didn't plan on ever drinking or using again, but I didn't have I didn't have the resources I needed. I didn't have the tools necessary to combat what was coming next. And I'll never forget, I was at a friend's house who was still doing some of those unsavory things, and he said, hey, I got some stuff left over from last weekend. And I said, well, that's great, that was never my problem. So I did that with him, and a week later, I'm back to drinking. Didn't take long for me to get right back to how heavily drinking I was, right? It's not like I started back drinking a beer. It was right back to the bottle that I was comfortable with and right back to swigging, because I don't take shots, I don't mix drinks, I don't sip on it. I take the bottle and I chug. That's the kind of drinker that I am. Because the faster I can chug that bottle, the faster I can find oblivion and disappear from the existence that I'm in. I don't want to be in this existence. I want to disappear from it. So I started doing that. We were kind of joking before the meeting, what your drink of choice was. And mine was gin, because I had this great idea, because I'd heard somewhere that, yeah, I know, that's a common face. But so I had heard somewhere that people can't smell gin on you. So I was like, this will work, right? Like I could do this, like I could live my life. Apparently it doesn't work if you're drinking an entire bottle of gin. Like it just will seep out of every pore in your body. But I had it in my head that was the way to go. And so at that point I had saved up enough money, because after getting out of that first rehab, I got a job. I was making very good money. Enough money to have saved up a significant amount and start a life, an independent life away from my parents. Because keep in mind, this whole time I've been living with my parents, right? Because I was a student, so I need to live with mom and dad. And then I was part-time student, part-time working. And so I got to live with mom and dad. And then they're kind of, all right, like, yeah, enough's enough, right? Like at some point. And so I'd saved up enough at this job to essentially set myself up to live an independent life. But that self-destruct button that we talked about earlier was right there for me. And so that day when my friend said, I've got some extra stuff, and I said, yes, self-destruct, let's do it. And so all of that money afforded me a very luxurious life. Because at this point, my parents were starting to see the drinking, the way that I was behaving. Like I said, my brother had gone through something similar, and so my mom, bless her heart, was like, hey, listen, that's fine. If you want to live here and you want to get your shit together, apologies, you gotta quit this. You gotta figure out what's going on. This just can't go on. Or you can keep doing what you're doing and get out. And so I said, all right, I'm out here. Because I had the money. But that luxurious life I'm talking about was just ultimately the fact that I had leather seats in my car, because now my existence was sleeping in my car, because I didn't take that money and go put a down payment on an apartment. I had already started up again, and this is progressive, and so I was worse off than I had ever been up to that point. And so I would black out in my car drinking my gin, insert gross face, and I wanted to continue those appearances, right? Now it's less people around me accepting me, because there's no one around me at this point. I have burned every bridge, I have ruined every relationship, I have pissed off every person who's ever tried, right? So it's not any individual, it's society at a large that I need to feel accepted by, right? So I need this acceptance, and so I'm going to continue keeping up appearances, even though I am now sleeping in my car. And so I would kind of keep myself relatively maintained, and I would roll my eyes at the homeless guys crawling out of the bushes, going to the liquor store at 8 o'clock in the morning, as I'm standing behind them in line, right? But I was better than them, because that wasn't me and that wasn't my life. And I would even go so far as to make comments to the attendant behind the counter, can't wait to mix something up after work. I really thought that I was giving this this air of oh, this guy's got his life together, man, right? Because I needed that acceptance. I didn't have people in my life anymore to feed that need to be accepted. It was just anyone who was around. I needed anyone who saw me to think, okay, that guy's doing all right. And then I would crawl back in my car, and I would drink that bottle, and I would chug it down until I blacked out. And that was my existence, right? I was no longer living. I was not alive, but I was living, right? The bare necessity, I was breathing, right? So I had a life, but I didn't want a life anymore. I wanted to die, but I was too much of a coward to go driving that car off of a bridge into the ocean, or take a gun, or take some pills. As ridiculous as it sounds, the insanity, right? I thought there would be some opportunity for me to die in a heroic fashion, saving people from a burning building, or children from a school bus sinking into the lake, right? When in reality, I wasn't driving further than the library to get my Wi-Fi and my laptop charged up so I could continue sitting in my car watching and drinking. There wouldn't have been that opportunity. But I didn't want to live anymore, that's for sure. I would, half the time when I was coherent enough, just wish that, I could just have a brain aneurysm or something in the middle of one of these blackouts and be done. Not have to wake up again, not have to feel this anymore. But in the meantime, I've got the bottle. That's all I need, right? In the meantime, before I die, let me just black out, oblivion. Because I don't want to be me, I don't want to be here, I don't want to face the things that I've done. So I continued doing that. Got so bad to the point where I started I would wake up out of a blackout, and I would swig down a bottle and I would just throw it up. But I was determined, and so if I was throwing up one swig, I could get two down, and I've now effectively got one swig in. And I would do that until my body wasn't rejecting it anymore, and now I'm good. Now I can continue drinking this bottle, I'm done, right? Beautiful, good plan. So that was where the physical rock bottom began. I didn't seem to care, though. It wasn't affecting anyone else, right? I'm not breaking into houses. I'm not hurting anybody else. I'm just in my car, blacking out. Big deal, right? God forbid I take, my body rejecting the alcohol as some kind of sign at all. I'd also learned that, without money coming in, that money wasn't going to last long. I was never coherent enough to be able to focus on a device to tell me how much money was left in my account. But the day came when the ATM stopped spitting out money. And so I started getting a little more desperate, right? And so that glass bottle on the top shelf of gin slowly worked its way down to that plastic one at the bottom. I had to pop off that little stopper they had on there, but it got the job done. And it kind of worked out too, because at that point I was blacking out so much, I probably would have broke the glass bottle and just been heartbroken. So luckily, plastic was cheaper for me. But I had worked myself to that point. And then out of a what must have been an economic choice, I switched to the larger handle bottles. The problem with that drinking method I had mentioned before with swigging the bottle, my gauge was usually, okay, I'm going to drink down to this part of the bottle, and then I'm going to wait a little bit, I'll put something on my laptop, let it start to wash over me, then I'll drink a little more down to this part of the bottle. The problem is that as economically sound as those large bottles were, there was a lot more liquid in them, and so drinking to that point of the bottle, as I continued to do with the larger ones, just wreaked more havoc on my body, and I began to feel the effect of not having alcohol in me. If I woke up, I would be shaking and I needed to get it in me. So ironically, my body's shaking because I need the alcohol, and then I try to drink it and I throw it up. So a lot of mixed signals going on right now, but I'm working through it, right? Did that for enough time that the financial rock bottom hit, right? That ATM stopped spitting money back out to me. So now I've got a financial, got a physical. Still, doesn't matter. I'm not affecting anybody. Death will come. This will end. It's bound to happen at some point. Let's just let it happen. But there was a day when I went to my parents' house because I wanted to get some clothes, take a shower, right? Keep up those appearances, because that liquor store guy needed to think I had a job still. So my mom, who would normally park her car in the driveway, just so happened this day to have parked her car in the garage and hadn't gone to work. And I walked into the house, and my mom saw me. And I looked in her eyes, and I've never experienced such a powerful spiritual and emotional feeling in my life, because the heartbreak in her eyes, the way she was looking at me, that was it. That was finally the rock bottom that I needed, because it was just slap in the face of, you are not the only person this is affecting. There are people in your life, regardless of how many bridges you burned and how hard you've tried to ruin everything, that still care. And so it was seeing her face that I finally was willing to admit that I had desperation, right? The gift of desperation had come way before, but I was just conceding that death would be the answer. And so she said, "Do you have any more alcohol?" And I mustered up the strength, and I said yes. I had half of one of those bottles left out in my car, and she said, "Okay, why don't you go grab that?" So I did. I brought it inside, and it's, again, the insanity. I can still remember how painful it was to watch her dumping that down the drain, right? Like, ooh, it hurt physically, because it's like, in my head, I'm like, I will stop, let me finish that bottle. All of these things, we will fix it, there will be a solution, we'll figure that out, let me finish that, right? For as quickly as that rock bottom hit, and as for quickly as I was given that gift of desperation, the insanity circled back around just as quick and said, no, let's get a little more. but she dumped it. And then she said, okay, well, now you have to do something, right? So I didn't realize how much Google played a part in my story. Then I hopped on Google again, and I looked up rehab facilities, and it was amazing because for all of the times leading up to that I had given this half-hearted and halfway try to do anything that didn't fill the needs of me or didn't revolve around me, right? I would try, but it just didn't work out, right? Like, oh, bummer. I actually tried, right? I actually wrote down numbers. I actually called people that I was finding on this Google machine. And I finally came across a place that just so happened to have one of the men from the original rehab that I had gone to. I had formed a good connection with him, and he had made it clear that he believed in the program, but it wasn't what they taught that rehab. And so I talked to him, and he said, hey, listen, I'm working here now, right? This is what you need to do. You gotta go get, you gotta get your government assistance. You gotta get your Social Security worked out. You gotta get your unemployment. Then you can get accepted to this county-run facility, right? And so I was on board. So I detoxed at my parents' house for a few days because it took about 3 days for them to get a bed ready for me or to have for me. I packed up 2 pairs of everything and I went to that rehab. And it was scary. I was scared to death. I think I was more scared at the idea that life was changing and that now I needed to live life or possibly live a life than I was of whatever was coming next, right? I could take it or leave it, any of those things. So in that facility, I was surrounded by an eclectic group of men. Let's say they're the same men that I would have been surrounded by had that government agency followed through with their maximum minimum of prison time. So I ended up making the relationships with the guys after all. Who knew, right? But it was one of those facilities where, the guys who were coming from mental institutions or literally coming in from prison in a taxi, this is where they were going, right? And then there's middle-class suburban me hanging out right in the middle, right? But it didn't stop me from doing what I needed to do because I was beginning to surround myself with the right people for the first time. And I was beginning to feel accepted by the right people for the first time. And there was a counselor there, one of the most frightening men I have yet to meet, or I've met to date in my life, Rick. He was an ex-gunny sergeant in the Marines. He had this story about, walked with a limp because he was almost cut in half and all this different stuff. But he had some very unique tactics, right? He would do that empty chair therapy where you sit up in front of the entire 50-person group and interview your mom, even though she's not there. But there's a lot of different things, right? He was a different age. But I respected him. And one night, he actually broke down into tears and shared that he had contempt for the book, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and then he picked it up, right? That contempt prior to investigation. And I heard that, and I'm like, if this scary dude that I respect at this point, in this juncture of my life, if he's talking about this book, I gotta give it a shot, right? So went back to the library that they had with, of course, the donated books. Somebody must have brought in, and I picked up the book that night, and I read. I'm not a big reader, right? I love my books on tape. If I can listen to it, I'm good to go. But in terms of picking up a book and reading, it is as close to a sleeping pill as I can get. But for some reason, this book had me. I kept reading that night, and I got close to 90 pages in, and fell asleep with it across my chest. I'd never done that, even as a kid, whatever Goosebumps or crazy books the kids had at that point. But it never happened because I had never felt so connected. I had never felt like someone had written something for me. This was how many years ago? Right, they had written something that I could relate to so much. And the one that really got me, page 73. Right, I got to this point and I'm like, they might as well have, this chapter should have been like to Matt, right? In my head, right? Still a little self-centered, right? It's all, the world revolved around me still at this point. So, but I get to this point and I'm like, whoa, all right, okay, all right. It says, more than most, the alcoholic leads a double life. He is very much the actor. I'm like, yeah, the guy's talking right to me. To the outer world, he presents his stage character. This is the one he likes his fellows to see. He wants to enjoy a certain reputation, but knows in his heart he doesn't deserve it. The inconsistency is made worse by the things he does on his sprees. Coming to his senses, he is revolted at certain episodes he vaguely remembers. These memories are a nightmare. He trembles to think someone might have observed him. As fast as he can, he pushes these memories far inside himself. He hopes they will never see the light of day. And this is the kicker. He is under constant fear and tension. That makes for more drinking. Right? It's this vicious cycle that I had put myself into, and they were addressing it directly. There was nothing abstract about it. It was directly put in this book so that I could relate to it. So that I could go, that's my story. That's my experience. It's the same reason why we get up and we share our experience, our strength, and our hope. But it was happening right there in the book. It was talking to me. I was reading it, but the book was talking to me. And so that rehab facility had outside meetings come in. And so started going to those. And I started seeing these guys, and I will admit it kind of pissed me off at first, right? Because they'd show up and they were all happy. They were all excited to be there, right? And they're talking about dinner that they just went to, and this guy just bought a new truck, and this guy just got a promotion. And I'm just fuming, because I'm like, well, my life is just absolute trash right now. I don't want to hear your guys' great news, right? But they weren't in there to gloat, right? They were there because of traction rather than promotion. And I was starting to realize that they had what I wanted. And so I went and asked one of them to be my sponsor. And he said, yeah, all right, I'll be your sponsor. Just remember, your current full-time job is to read the book. Right? You got nothing else going on for you. You are in here 24 hours a day. You get into that book. Right? Next meeting we have, you're gonna sit out here with me 45 minutes before the meeting. And we're gonna talk to any other guys in this house that might want to talk about it. Okay. Right? So we started working the steps. And I got out of that rehab facility. I had that same sponsor. And I went to a sober living house. SLETHU, there's much different acronyms for it. It was a sober living house, right? They required so many meetings a week. If I had any kind of erratic behavior, they would test me, right? That kind of place. I had to be home by 9 o'clock every night, 9 p.m. Because chores started at 9:15, and there was a house meeting at 10, right? Old me would have said, oh, it's not really for me. But I had found something in this book, and I had found something in those meetings that I was going to in the rehab. So I was willing to do what it took. And at the time, my sponsor was saying, go to meetings. Shut up. Don't talk. Just listen. Right? If you get called on, go ahead and share. Right? But just remember, you got to listen. So I did. And I would actually ride my bike, because at this point, didn't have a car anymore, didn't have a license, and I needed to get to meetings, so I rode a bike, right? And this is the same guy who would never have allowed anyone to see him riding a bike, because that means you can't afford a car. Like, you're not good enough for a car, that's why you're riding a bike, right? But I had to put that aside, right? Gone was that pride and the ego. Gone was that self-centeredness, and now I needed to get to a meeting, because I needed to go to those meetings, and because there could be someone at that meeting that needed me to be at that meeting. I never knew, but I had to show up, so I kept showing up. I got a job 2 weeks after rehab, got a job, rode my bike to that. And all of a sudden, having close to 90 days sobriety, I was showing up on time. And I wasn't calling out. And I was doing the work I was supposed to do, right? I continued doing that, continued going to meetings. Sponsor and I parted ways. He made it clear when we had first started that he could work with me for as long as he could. He was in the upper levels of his college. He was in a master's program, and so he made it clear, listen, there's going to be a point where you're just going to have to find another sponsor, but I'm going to work with you until we get to that point. So I ended up finding a new sponsor. Didn't take long, right? I didn't allow myself to sit too long without one because I knew that's what I was told to do. And I started really surrounding myself with people in the rooms, not the ones that sat outside just talking trash and gossip and, oh, have you heard about so-and-so? And, oh my God, I can't believe so-and-so did this. But the ones that were in the room setting up the tables and the ones who were getting the coffee ready. Those were now the people I wanted to be a part of because they had a happiness and I could see it that the other people didn't have. And that was now where I wanted to be accepted, right? And I was. Because by showing up and doing the deal and living that, I know the only requirement is a desire to stop drinking, but I feel wholeheartedly in the beginning that I had to earn my seat, and so that's what I worked to do, right? I showed up. I did what I was told to do. I had my sponsor, his favorite line was, AA is simple. It's just the world's greatest game of monkey see, monkey do. You find somebody that's doing the right thing, and you just, how'd you do it? What are you doing? And then you do it, right? They tell you what they did, you do it. It's pretty simple, right? It's not always easy, but it's simple enough. So, continued showing up when I was supposed to. If I said I was going to be somewhere, I would be there, right? And then slowly the promises, right? Slowly, I was able to afford a vehicle, and I was driving myself to meetings, right? And then slowly I was able to move out of that sober living house, and I had an apartment of my own. And then slowly I'm meeting somebody in the rooms, and it doesn't even feel like it was slowly anymore. I've been sober for a little over 5 years now, and we moved across the country to buy a home in a place that we didn't know anybody, right? But I can remember in the beginning when the question was asked, how are we going to make friends? And the simple answer was, we're in AA. Go to a meeting. Introduce yourself, shake hands, show up to things, and you're going to have friends. It's that simple, right? Because I'm looking at a room full of strangers, but every single person in here I can relate to. And I know if I sat and had a conversation with any of you, I'd feel right at home. Because we can all relate to that story. We can all relate to something. And even though I'm guilty as much as anyone else may be of feeling the pressure to carry a message when I speak, I'm just going to tell my story, right? Because at some point, something in here, I've been talking for 42 minutes, a word might have related. I don't know, something hit. And that's all that matters, right? Is that one person in any room is going to get something from what you're sharing, and it might be that one message they needed to hear, or that one thing that they can relate to that's going to shift their life like mine was shifted. And thanks to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and the book sorry guys, but they wrote it for me. And good sponsorship, I have a life that's worth living now, right? And everything that I've gained in the last 5 years fits in a 1 ounce glass of alcohol, and I can drink it all away just that fast. Because I don't drink like most people. Because when I start, I can't stop. And once I've started, I can't stop thinking about it, and then I start and I won't stop. And I've been there, and I don't want to be there again. Because I love the life that I'm living. I have a relationship with my higher power today that I never thought I would have. I've definitely gained a greater understanding since moving out here. My current sponsor has been fantastic with that. Very subtle, but slowly kind of inching things in the right direction. But I always used to say that my higher power communicates to me through my gut, right? And I always used to say that my higher power doesn't tell me when I'm doing things right. My higher power tells me when I'm doing things wrong. And my gut, it's going to start turning. things are going to start not feeling right. But I've learned recently that my higher power does communicate to me through my gut, right? It's that feeling of being spiritually fed, right? It's when you don't want to go to a meeting, and then you go and you have a conversation with someone that you wouldn't have had if you had sat at home and done what you wanted to do, or if when you show up to that thing you were invited to, and afterwards you just feel fed, right? It's meeting with my sponsor at 6:30 in the morning. I don't want to do that, but I feel fed afterwards, right? And now with the sponsee that I have in this area, like meeting early in the morning, I don't want to. I want to cancel. I want to sleep in, but I don't, because my gut's like, ugh. And then I show up, I'm fed, right? And that's what the program has given to me. And I thank each and every one of you in this room. I thank the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I thank fantastic sponsorship. If you don't have a sponsor in this room, go get one. Find somebody who has what you want, ask them to sponsor you, and then do what they say. It's not that hard. It's simple, but it's not always going to be easy. That's all I've got. Thank you so much.